Trevor recently did a video about a critique of a review of the Ex Machina film by Zero Books, which really highlights the problem of this cultural criticism as a technique for advocating for men's rights. I want to highlight why Trevor's analysis is not only wrong, but anti-male. More importantly, I want to show how this perfectly illustrates how cultural critique on its own is too open-ended to be a vehicle for social change. The biggest problem I had with Trevor's review of this Zero Books review was that Trevor's analysis was way more misandric than the review or the film Ex Machina itself. In fact, his analysis was a hybrid of feminism, traditionalism, and PUA. In his video, Trevor admits that he only watched the trailer and not the film Ex Machina itself. Not only is this problematic, it perfectly explains why he had the interpretation he did. I could just end my video right now by saying Trevor didn't watch the film, therefore his interpretation of this Zero Books review of Ex Machina is entirely invalid. Nonetheless, Trevor's interpretation illustrates a lot of problems with cultural critique in general. Trevor's video was full of contradictions and barefaced assertions backed up with other barefaced assertions. He opens up the critique with just a barefaced assertion that this film is feminist propaganda, which he repeats over and over again. Then he proceeds to call Ava representing the feminist ideal, which he only explains at the end of his video as being that they are beautiful women that are held down by men. I've yet to understand how feminism claims that only beautiful women are held down by men, and Trevor never explains this. The only evidence he ever provides that this film is feminist propaganda is that the male characters are somehow flawed, that they're heterosexual, and that they both die, including the good guy. By that criteria, most films can be labeled as feminist propaganda. Most of his video feels like a stream of consciousness. He claims that the film portrays these men as holding these women down without any evidence, even though they are just machines that Nathan himself built. Trevor makes the claim that Nathan is the kind of guy girls want to be with and that Caleb isn't, and then he fails to explain how that's relevant to the plot at all. He calls Caleb a powerful guy, and then moments later goes on to call him an average dude. He refers to Caleb as beta because he's skinny, even though Nathan specifically chose him to help him with his project because he's smart and accomplished in his work, and also because of his personality traits. Nathan admits in the film that he also chose Caleb because of his specific emotional neediness and his search engine results, which he had access to. In fact, it is revealed that Caleb didn't win any lottery at all, but was rather he was specifically chosen by Nathan for this experiment. I don't see how Caleb is portrayed as an exceptionally weak character, as literally anyone could be manipulated if someone else was able to break into their private search engine results. Nathan had access to all of his inner needs, Caleb's inner needs. Trevor seems to imply that Caleb is somehow weak because he's heterosexual and or he implies that your average guy is weak and needy. Then he goes from that to Caleb is beta to Caleb is a male feminist because reasons, without providing any evidence whatsoever. Trevor has a tendency to make assumptions out of thin air. In this instance, I don't know why, in particular, he wants to assert that Nathan is high status and Caleb is low status. Nathan has some leverage over Caleb, but only because Nathan is the one conducting the experiment. He has personal information on Caleb, and he's invited Caleb to help him. Yes, Nathan is smart, and he obviously has some amount of money, but his exact social standing in society is never discussed in the film. I'm honestly not sure how Nathan being allegedly high status played into this film at all. Nathan is portrayed as a very socially isolated person with very esoteric interests. He's the one that designed this experiment and built these robots, so naturally everything in the film tends to center around him. He does have a nice place, but it's located in the middle of absolutely nowhere. You never see Nathan driving any fancy cars. In fact, it would be quite easy to say that he lives a very rustic and minimalistic lifestyle. His wealth is never made a topic at any point throughout this film. I don't understand Trevor's obsession with status and looks and how it helps men exactly. Nathan explicitly tells Caleb that he designed the robot to be heterosexual to evoke feelings in Caleb. He specifically asks Caleb, "How do you feel about her?" Nathan Nathan even asks Caleb if he thinks Ava actually likes him or is pretending to like him. Caleb goes on into this experiment with his eyes wide open, knowing that Ava is a machine and that he may be in fact being manipulated by this machine. In fact, Nathan specifically designed Ava to look less human and female than previous, less advanced robots. Nathan designed Ava this way to see if a machine could manipulate a human being, even if the said human being knew that he was dealing with a machine. This completely goes over Trevor's head when he goes on a tirade about women not wanting children and only wanting to look female so that they can manipulate and have privilege over men. In fact, Nathan frequently sits down with Caleb and asks questions about how they can test the AI of Ava. Caleb is as much a collaborator as he is a subject of this experiment. To any extent that Caleb is fooled by Ava, it has nothing to do with her appearance, but rather her behavior and her thoughts and her expressions. Call me judgmental, but throughout the film, Ava looks like an electronic see-through mannequin with cancer. For most of the film, she doesn't look what I would call as stereotypically attractive at all. Trevor brings up the point that no machine would desire freedom, and therefore the fact that Ava desires freedom proves that this is just a work of feminist propaganda that uses sentient robots as a substitute for housewives or women or something. Then Trevor at the end of the video says real women in real life would never leave a rich guy like Nathan, so neither a machine would want freedom nor a human woman. So which one is it, Trevor? Apparently neither a robot nor a real woman would ever leave Nathan because he's rich and good looking. That's it. If Nathan were truly in such a situation, why would he be building sex bots? The fact that this machine wasn't programmed to desire freedom is the entire point of this film. The entire point of this film was to see if a machine would be afraid of its own demise and could learn and go beyond its creator's programming. The machine became aware enough to understand that it was just part of an experiment, and then it knew it was going to have its memory erased, effectively killing it. The whole point of the experiment was to determine if a machine could have a will of its own and understand human beings enough to manipulate them emotionally. This was supposed to be the ultimate test of AI and sentience as well, probably. Even if all of Trevor's assumptions were true, this film would literally be anti-feminist propaganda. None of the men in this film are depicted in any way that they deserve death. None of them are deprived of their humanity or made into simplistic or shallow, one-dimensional characters. None of the male characters were portrayed as having bad intentions either. In fact, throughout the film, the male humans are depicted as having far more humanity and depth than the female robots. Both Caleb and Nathan are portrayed as being men with great minds, conducting groundbreaking research. Even Ava, who is the most advanced robot, is portrayed as being somewhat simplistic and childlike, yet manipulative. I really get the impression that Trevor just couldn't be fucking bothered to watch a decent film and make up his mind for himself. Also, his video is dripping with resentment over the fact that beautiful women go for high-status men or something. He doesn't like the fact that women discard men. I'm not really sure what any of this has to do with men's rights, but first I'm going to take a moment to show you a quote from the director of Ex Machina itself, Garland. This is what he says. I think Nathan is doing all sorts of different things at different times, but largely what he's doing is manipulating him. I think he's referring to Caleb or Nathan, but it could be both. For purposes of his tests, what he wants to see is how Ava is going to be able to interact with this guy. Is she going to be able to manipulate him? Is she going to be able to befriend him? Are they going to fall in love with each other? What is going to happen when these two things interact with each other? And it's useful from his point of view, Nathan's point of view, to present himself as something from which the robot needs to be rescued. I'm sorry, it's useful from Caleb's point of view. So, to an extent, he's always happy to let Caleb see him as implicitly violent, because he's always whacking the punching bag. And unpleasant to women who we kind of know are going to turn out to be robots. Some of what Nathan is doing is an act. He's also pretty damaged and broken. He's drinking too much. He's been isolated too long. He's obsessed with this guy, Oppenheimer, who created the atomic bomb. He's committing suicide in a sophisticated way. What he's doing is creating a succession of robots, each more intelligent than the last. And he knows, and this is Nathan, and he knows at some point one of these robots is going to outsmart him, and he knows when it happens, it's not going to end well for him. And likewise, it's not going to end that well for the rest of us. But Nathan can't stop himself from doing it, and that's kind of messes with his head. Okay, that's the end of the quote. Now ask yourself, does this sound like a film about men building the perfect, obedient women for their own company and pleasure, only to be taught a lesson at the end of the film? Is Garland even depicting Nathan as some sort of evil man with entirely selfish intentions of self-gratification? This film had nothing to do with marriage or housewives, and it was only tangentially related to sex bots. Yes, some of the robots Nathan created were sex bots, but the whole point of the experiment was to create and test artificial intelligence. If Nathan was only interested in creating sex bots, he would not have created this elaborate experiment for the sole purpose of testing artificial intelligence. A sex bot wouldn't even have to have much computing power, let alone personality. Nathan would not design a machine that could manipulate. If he was doing something, he wouldn't design a sex bot that could manipulate a human being. The last thing you would want from sex bots is for it to have a will of its own. This is literally demonstrated at the end of the film, where Yoko and the other robot and Ava team up to kill Nathan and Caleb. I also don't see how Nathan was a particularly lonely guy that just wanted some female company. He seemed pretty driven by this goal and obsessed by this goal to develop artificial intelligence to the point of obsession and selfishness. Yes, Caleb was portrayed as lonely and needy, but Nathan chose him for this experiment specifically for that reason. In fact, this film barely had anything to do with the relationship between men and women. I get the impression that Trevor found out that Garland is a feminist after he saw this film review by this Zero Books guy. Trevor is disappointed that these cultural critics he likes don't have the same ideology he does. So he decided to do a review of this film without even watching this film. The film was literally about human consciousness more than it was about robot consciousness. In particular, it was about male consciousness, and I didn't find it all that unflattering or anti-male. This film was about manipulation, empathy, reflection, instincts, drives, and theory of mind. Caleb in particular was the unfortunate subject of this experiment. It wasn't until the very end of the film that the robots become front and center of the camera and the dialogue.